just about one more moment and it's 11:30 now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. I am happy to be back for our September Lunch and Learn. I'm happy to see everybody here on the call today. A couple of housekeeping items before we jump in. I'm going to go ahead and share with you how to start live captioning if you are interested in utilizing that during today's meeting. You're going to navigate up to the ribbon at the top where you see more denoted by the three dots. You're going to go down to language and speech, and then you're going to click on show live captions. So if you are interested in setting that on your end, only you can see that. You can turn that on there. And then if you're interested in having live captions on all of your meetings, you'll go right back up to the ribbon there. You'll select more denoted by the three notes. You'll go to settings, and then you will go to show live captions in all meetings. So if you're interested in doing that, those are the instructions. I will put those instructions in the chat for you all here in just a moment. So if you're coming into the meeting and you missed that, those instructions will be there. Just a reminder to please keep yourselves muted as you're coming into the meeting today. A couple of other housekeeping items. Previously recorded Lunch and Learns can be found on the TEIS Community Resource website. Today's presentation will be there in a couple of days. Give our communications team some time to get that uploaded, but that will also be available. I will put the FormStack link for today's presentation in the chat closer to the end of our presentation. You will be able to provide feedback and get your confirmation of attendance today by filling out that FormStack. Also, another reminder, please try to utilize the chat just for questions today. You're welcome to ask me questions in the chat. You're welcome to ask our presenter questions in the chat, but we want avoid audience members to each other in the chat. Just utilize that for questions to me or the presenter. If you have a question just specifically for me, you are welcome to shoot me an email, and you're welcome to do that during the presentation today. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat here in just a moment. So if you have a question for me, feel free to shoot me an email. Our presenter today, Katie Overby with the Newborn Hearing Follow-Up Program, is going to share some wonderful information with us. If you have questions for her, feel free to put those in the chat during the presentation, and then we'll cover those at the end. So we'll let her get through her information, and then I can report those questions out to her. She's going to provide her contact information on one of the later slides in the presentation. So if you are interested in getting some additional resources from her or getting the PowerPoint presentation from today, you'll reach out directly to Katie and she can provide that information to you. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Katie. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Emily. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm even more excited that you all have taken time out of your schedule to come and learn about a low incidence population of deaf and hard of hearing children. And this is my 18th year working in deaf education. I have mostly been a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing in surrounding Middle Tennessee schools, and I absolutely love what I do. And I asked Emily just to hold questions till the end because I would chase squirrels all day long, and I would be happy to answer any questions either at the end or through email after the fact if we run out of time. So we will go ahead and jump right in. So on the screen, there's 4 pictures, and there are 4 other careers on here. And I know you guys are already thinking, we already wear a lot of hats and we don't need to do any other jobs, but we're going to add 4 more jobs to your profile today. So the first one, the top left, are builders, and we kind of think of them as laying the foundation, which is what we need to do with children who are deaf and hard of hearing. The next one on the top right is a radio show host or a DJ, in front of a microphone. And that's something else that we're going to talk about doing today is narrating what we're doing. We know that kids need access to a lot of quality language, and what better way than giving them exposure to that. In the bottom left are some people playing tennis. And so that's going to serve as our serve and return, that when kids and infants are wanting to communicate with us, it's important for us to return that communication with them. And then last, while we're going through this presentation, we're going to use the word language, and we're going to be talking about giving kids information. But I also want you to be thinking about being a brain surgeon, that we are wiring the brain. We are building their pathways and laying the foundation. We're literally being architectures of their brains in such these early ages as we're increasing their language. So, how did all of this get started? Back in 2008, there was a family called the Purriers, and Claire was born, and they did not know that she had a profound bilateral hearing loss until a little bit later. And the family really advocated for the state to pass newborn hearing screening for all children. So, most, if not all, of the states now in the United States have a law that all children must be screened at birth. So that is where newborn hearing follow-up and early intervention has stemmed from, especially for Tennessee. So, and we know that screening kids' hearing is so significant because when it's left undetected, not only does it impact a child's speech and language, it also impacts their cognitive development. We'll kind of dive into that too. So EDDI, or the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program, we have 136 guidelines. So by 1 month, we want to have all children screened. We want to at least know whether they pass or fail a screening. By 3 months, if they fail either ear, we want to have a diagnostic hearing screening. And by 6 months, we want to have them enrolled with you all. So, and we know there are barriers and things don't necessarily always land that way, but those are the guidelines that we try to abide by. And we want all families with a child with hearing loss to have the support and services, and we want them to at least be referred to you all. So we have some data that we're going to look at just kind of nationwide. Globally, this is the data that if you went and pulled it, this is kind of what you would find. So in 2020, there were 60,000, or not 60, but 6,000 infants that were identified with a permanent hearing loss. And we're doing an excellent job kind of across the states of screening at 98%. And Tennessee's a little bit higher than that. And you guys are going to see Tennessee specific numbers in just a second. And then a lot of 50 to 60% of the kids have their hearing loss is attributed to a syndrome. And one of the most fascinating things, and I think this is where we are so lucky to have newborn hearing screening and why it is so important, that 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. And one of the most common rebuttals of parents is, nobody in our family has a hearing loss. Like, where did this come from? And so it's so important to have that discussion and to be able to screen and give them that information so they can follow up with it. And it's a very low incidence disability that impacts children. So only 1 out of 3 out of 1,000 births. So this is more national data, and we are so fortunate at the state to have some epidemiologists who love data and spend their days looking into Tennessee specific data. And as a teacher, as an educator, I love knowing my kids and knowing just what my caseload could potentially look like. And Charles is going to talk you guys through Tennessee specific data. So Charles.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Katie, so much. So I'm going to hop in here, and share some Tennessee specific data. Katie shared a little bit of that kind of nationwide one. You can leave it here. Yeah, that's perfect. So we're going to share some Tennessee specific data. I'm mainly going to focus on like some TEIS and early intervention and enrollment specific data, since that's what we're kind of concerned about when it comes to education and hearing. So for this data is coming from our newborn screening program. I'm going to share 3 years of data combined. So we're going to look at babies that are born from 2021 to 2023 combined. That way we have some meaningful case numbers for our more rural or less populated areas. We'll first take a look at just the raw enrollments by our districts. And one thing to mention here is that our districts are assigned based on the mom's resident county. We'll then look at the distribution of births. Referrals are basically our diagnoses. Whenever we make a diagnosis, they're immediately referred, and our enrollments by district. And then we'll look at timeliness data. So we'll take a look at the median number of days between diagnosis and enrollment. And we'll look at that EDDI-6 benchmark, that percent of enrollments that are occurring by 6 months of age. You head to the next slide, please. So first up, we're just going to look at our enrollments, our raw numbers by the districts for 2021 through 2023 births. So on this map here, we're broken into our different districts, and we can see that the larger numbers are generally assigned to our more populated metro areas. So for the 3 years total, we have a little under 250 enrollments at 245. We see Greater Nashville with the most at 59, followed by South Central with 55, and East Tennessee with 36. Our last really metro area is the Memphis Delta, but we see that they only have 18 enrollments, which is about kind of in line with what we see for our more less populated rural areas. Areas like Upper Cumberland with 22, Southeast with 18. The West districts are split into North and South. We have 12 for Northwest and 11 for Southwest. And then First Tennessee over there on the far east with 14, excuse me. One thing that I really like to show is on the next slide, if you'll hit that, Katie, where we're going to look at all of our distributions. Now, there's a fair bit of information on here, but I love this chart. So there's 3 bars for each of our districts. The leftmost bar in each one, which is dark blue, is the distribution of births. So the percent of births by region. The middle bar, the red one, is the distribution of hearing loss cases or diagnoses. And the rightmost, the kind of goldish yellow, is our enrollments. So on here, it's really easy then to kind of see, if you focus first on the blue bar, we can see our more populated metro areas, like Greater Nashville, at the most, at about 20% of the births for the state. We were followed by that, then around 15% for like East Tennessee, the Memphis Delta, South Cumberland, South Central. And then the rest of our regions are usually kind of falling between 5 to 10% of our births. If we'd expect kind of everything to be really equally distributed, I'm interested in so even national state, they actually see about 30% of all the diagnoses. You hit back real quick, there we go. And then you'll also see that Greater Nashville only has about 25% of the TAS enrollments, despite only having 20% of the births. Kind of on the flip side, the other one I really want to mention here is that Memphis Delta one. We see that Memphis Delta has about 15% about all the births in the state, but they only have about 10% of the diagnoses and a little less than that for our enrollments. The South Central area also kind of mimics the Greater Nashville one in the sense that about 15% of all the births are seen in South Central, but we see that they have a larger percentage of the hearing loss cases and a larger percent of the enrollments compared to their number of births. The other ones generally fall in the middle there. And then I'll just point out in the very far right, we have non-Tennessee residents. So of course, those ones, we don't worry about the enrollments. We're not referring them for an early intervention services, but we do see quite a few numbers of the births and hearing loss cases being from non-Tennessee residents. Moving on then into some of our timeliness data, if you'll hit the next slide. For this one, we're going to be looking at our median number of days between diagnosis and enrollment. For this, we see that generally most of our regions fall around about 45 days between the diagnosis and enrollment and TAS, kind of give or take a few days there. But then there's a couple of districts. We have Greater Nashville being slightly larger at about 60 days for the median. And we have South Central being a little bit larger than that, about a little under, I think it was 68 if I remember correctly, a little under 70 for the South Central region. And overall, the statewide, we're about 49.5 days between when a child is diagnosed and when they're actually enrolled in early intervention services. And then finally, I think ending on probably the most important one, especially given what Katie's talking about today, we're going to look at that EDDI-6 benchmark. So this is looking at the percent of infants who are diagnosed, who are enrolled in early intervention services by 6 months of age. And of course, we want them enrolled as soon as possible so that they can get the services they need. But we see that for Tennessee, we definitely have quite a bit of room for improvement. We're kind of oscillating all over the place for our regions here. We have some regions like First Tennessee with the highest bar there in the second one at about 70%, which is really good. I believe that is the southeastern region, yeah, about 60%, also quite good. The rest of them, we start kind of falling below that, between about 45 to 55% for all these, with a couple other regions falling below, with the Memphis Delta at about 30%, and the Southwest region being about 25-ish%. And overall, if we just look at the statewide, we're only at about 49.3% for those 3 years. So there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. And as Katie's going to mention, it's really important that we get these kids enrolled as soon as possible so that they can get the services they need. And I believe that should be it for all of our little bit of data here for Tennessee specific. So I'll toss it back to Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much. I could look at the data all day long and listen to Charles explain it to us. So hopefully you all found that worthwhile. So, and as Charles was saying, we want to get these kids enrolled as soon as possible to get them access, because babies already start hearing in the womb between like 16 and 22 weeks. So even if we diagnose the child at 1 day old, we're already 20 weeks and 1 day late to hearing. And there is a pioneer pediatric audiologist named Dr. Carol Flexer, and she calls hearing loss a neurological emergency. And we're going to watch a little video of her talking about this. Actually, I don't know that we are.
It may ask you when you share the video to ensure that you share your sound as well. So if you see that, just click yes to make sure that you're sharing your sound.
Okay. Sorry, I actually can't get it on the other screen. So we might skip her video and I will just talk through it. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I don't know how to get it on that screen. So I have watched Dr. Carol Flexer numerous times, and basically she is talking about that our ears are the doorway to the brain. And so we kind of talked earlier about the builders and the brain surgeons, and we want to get the sound in, and then we want the brain to be able to process that information. So if I send this PowerPoint out, you guys can watch her because she's much more articulate than I am about that. But really, as we're thinking about language, we're thinking about the brain processing it. Hearing is just the way in. It's just for sound getting to the brain. So we want to make sure that kids have early exposure. We want to make sure that they have a language-rich environment. We talk about quality of language, and we also talk about quantity of language. So, and when we talk about the word language, you can think what you want. It can be signed language, it can be spoken language, it can be a variety of things. We're going to talk about communication choices shortly. The brain is not biased. They have done lots of research, and basically the brain is just looking for patterns. So that auditory cortex in their brain is going to respond no matter which way you're giving them language. So, and we know that, again, that early intervention, we need to get them identified and diagnosed, and then to you all, because you guys are during the most critical time to help these children. And we know that you can help them basically with those natural processes of building language, as opposed to doing a remediation, which we know is going to take more time and effort. And I think it's interesting that lately that you all have pushed TEIS, kind of the extended version, out to 5 years old, because that correlates so nicely with the research of that birth to 5 timeline, that the acquisition of language is going to be natural and effortless. Again, thinking about those, the brain surgeon, that we are literally taking those pathways and they're forming so rapidly during this time. The brain's most receptive to input. And not only are we building the language, but we're shaping their cognitive architecture. What happens when we don't give kids language, or when we don't ID kids, when we miss that, or when we miss the 1-3-6? We can end up with a child who is language deprived. Language deprivation is not a language delay Language deprivation is that they lacked the access. They didn't have access to the language. And language deprivation, I'm sure you have probably run across a child like this, unfortunately, in your career, and it can be significant, it can be irreversible, and there's a long-lasting impact. So we really want to try to not have a child that's language delayed. If we want to avoid language deprivation, there are some steps that we can take, and that includes the exposure. Again, sign language, spoken language, however you can give the child exposure to the language. We want quality language, we want to do it often, and we want to give them access. Their brain wants to receive that information. They're sponges, they want that, they need that input. And when we have exposure and when we have access, it leads to comprehension. So then the brain can start to understand what language we are giving them. And we need all three of those areas to ensure that we have the development of language. So if we want child to have access and to have exposure, we need to know what their hearing is. And there are full degrees on reading an audiogram, so I am going to give you the quickest version ever of an audiogram. But basically, normal hearing down to profound hearing. We have quiet to loud. And then if you think from left to right is the pitches. So think of a piano. On an audiogram, you're going to see the left ear represented with blue, and you're going to see the right ear represented with red. And the best way that I can tell you this is red, right, round. If you see red, round circles, we're talking about the right ear. So there are also there's three different types of hearing loss. We're going to talk about the most prominent hearing losses that you're going to come across would be conductive. And those are going to be the formation of the ear. A lot of times kids with syndromes might have small ear canals or lots of ear infections, earwax. They could be missing their outer ear too. Microtia or atresia. So that would be a conductive loss. So that's going to be more the middle and outer ear. And then a sensory neural hearing loss is going to be that inner ear, those hair cells or auditory nerve damage. And sometimes the sensory neural hearing loss would come from the family history, CMV, certain medications. Maybe some of you have more of those complex learners, children on your caseload where they fought in the NICU and they were given certain medications that may have impacted their hearing. There's other syndromes that would impact hearing loss, which would result in a sensory neural hearing loss. And then sometimes we just don't know the cause of their hearing loss, but we know they have a hearing loss. So going back to that audiogram, so we know it can be conductive or sensory neural. Sometimes it can be mixed. But basically, when you're looking at an audiogram, we know this red, right, round is their right ear. We know that the blue is their left ear. And so anything above the line, they cannot hear. Anything below the line, they can hear. So if a parent were to hand you an audiogram and say, I can't make heads or tails of this, at least you could say, oh, they can't hear this, they can hear this. So you can kind of like fold the audiogram over to the back of it. And that is a very, very quick explanation of a hearing loss, and it is not technical. So when we're talking about, now that we know their hearing loss, we can start thinking about communication choices. So this has changed kind of in the last couple years that I have been in deaf ed, and for a while it was we're going to pick one and then we're going to try to stick to it as closely as we can. And I think the more diverse children that we're seeing, especially that we do have newborn hearing screening and we are understanding the impact of hearing loss, we're starting to understand that communication can look different for everybody. It's individualized. It's going to go on their IFSP and their IEP and become a team decision. And there's no one size fits all. The other thing about choosing communication modes is that you can have that conversation with the team and with the parent, and it can be fluid. It can change. You could start with spoken language and then decide to add in sign language. You could start with sign language and decide to add in spoken language. The other thing here, and I think this is where it's important to lean in on PTs and OTs, is that we're looking at kids that have a variety of medical and physical conditions. They might not be able to do American Sign Language, but working with your OT and PT, you may figure out ways to adapt so that they can have access to some signed language. Also working with OTs, PTs, and speech to look at their oral motor skills and what would be feasible, what kind of sounds are they going to be able to produce. So teachers of the deaf and audiologists are going to be able to support you in terms of audiological information, and then you work within your team to come up with a plan that works for them, also weighing in the parents' choice and their decision, what they think might work best for their child. And I think this is where knowing the whole child and their ability, and then making an informed decision, and also making sure that you're being a coach to the parent and not just a cheerleader, like them saying like, oh, I want them to sign, but knowing it's not necessarily within their physical ability to do it. So using your expertise to really weigh in, and this is a great way for the team to be involved. So looking at those modes of communication, ASL, which is a language, and there are very strong opinions from sides of the deaf community about, don't refer to it as baby signs, please. It is sign language. It is their language. And so you can teach a baby sign language, but you're teaching them sign language. Spoken language would be using amplification, which we're going to talk about in a minute, to really focus in on those auditory skills. They're developing their listening and spoken language skills. Cued speech is hand cues. So I am not as familiar with cued speech. There isn't a huge population in Middle Tennessee that uses this, but I know it is a popular mode, and some teachers choose to use some variation of cued speech for teaching children who are deaf and hard of hearing to read. It helps with those phonological skills. And then SIMCOM and total communication, it means the same thing in some ways, and it doesn't mean the same thing in other ways, clear as mud. SIMCOM would be speaking and signing simultaneously. And then total communication can also mean speaking and signing. But then in the special education world, total communication can mean speaking or signing, or maybe even using an AAC device or pictures, visuals to elicit communication. So all of that is great. I think the takeaway here is that you find something that you have agreed upon with the team and the parent, and you're giving the child access to being able to communicate. So there are lots of professionals that you guys can dial into, which I know working in the field that you're in, you're used to phoning friends for help. Don't forget about the audiologist. The ones that I've worked with they're brilliant, and they're happy to help, and they're happy to break down the information to make sure that you guys are making informed decisions. Speech language pathologists, teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing, while they don't necessarily work directly within TEIS, most of the school districts employ teachers of the deaf. I'm available to you all. And then those early childhood teachers and caregivers, they know the child best, especially if they're with them day in and day out. Social workers and care coordinators can help with the medical piece of coordinating amplification, if that's what the parents choose to do. Parent guides and deaf mentors are available through either Family Voices, who presented, I believe, a couple weeks ago, and deaf mentors are available through Tennessee School for the Deaf. And then there's also some other nonprofit agencies throughout the state that could help parents making informed decisions about communication and understanding their child with a hearing loss. Because I know it's a low incidence population, you all maybe either don't have a child who's deaf and hard of hearing on your caseload or far and few between. And these are just excellent resources to reach out to that can help navigate and have conversations with parents and other team members if you don't know. And then lastly, the thing that I wanted to point out is that the hearing technology companies have representatives that are amazing and they are available to you. And I'm going to list some of the popular brands on another slide. And I also have some links and resources later in the presentation. But if you have a child on your caseload, especially if you're not close to a clinic, reach out to them. They can help troubleshoot. They can get you resources. They can help figure out like how to mail in broken equipment. Years ago, all the equipment used to have to go through the child's audiologist, and they've really stepped back from that to put the responsibility, just the parents can mail it directly to the company and they'll mail it back. So if something's not working, that's also a great resource for you to have and not feel like you're alone and have to try to troubleshoot a hearing aid or cochlear implant all by yourself. So speaking of amplification, there's a couple pieces of equipment that are more popular or what you guys are going to see on your caseload. So hearing aids, those just amplify the sounds, and a child could have one hearing aid or two hearing aids. And there's lots of different models and variations of that. Then there's the bone anchored hearing aid or a BAHA, or sometimes you can see BAI, and that means that the bone anchored hearing aid has been implanted. Otherwise, the child might wear a soft bone BAHA on their head, and that is just the vibration is going to the ear. There's cochlear implants. Again, a child can have one or two. You could see a cochlear implant and a hearing aid where the child could be bimodal. And that's a little bit more complex where we're going to, again, that's helping bypass that auditory nerve and we're sending that signal straight to the brain. And then again, here are just some of those popular brands that I mentioned before that if you have a child that has this brand and you needed some assistance, you could reach out to the rep to help kind of work through any troubleshooting issues or to assist the parent. And they all have incredible resources on their websites. I mean, some of them have full lessons and units and all sorts of things. So if you needed ideas of where to go with lessons, that would be a great place to look. So one of the things that I would recommend, if you have a child who is deaf and hard of hearing on your caseload, especially if you're about to provide direct services to the child, and that child has amplification, this is a simple way. It's called a listening check or a Ling sound check. This is a great way to ensure that the child's equipment is working, that you are getting the most bang for your buck while you're doing the session. So this is going to confirm that the devices are working and that they're transmitting sound correctly. The sounds cover the range of speech sounds, and there's no need to hoot and holler at the kid. You can just present it at the same loudness and duration as if you were talking to them. And then you want to give the child wait time. This is going to work best for a child that is able to kind of go back and forth with you. But sometimes even infants and younger kids will kind of have those kind of startle reflexes or their eyes, or they'll stop sucking on, their binky or their bottle. And then you'll be able to know that they're working, especially if you don't have any way to actually listen to their devices. But it's a good way to ensure that they have access and that you're not asking them to produce sounds or language that isn't accessible or audible to them. So in order to do a listening check, you're going to give them 6 sounds, and ideally they wouldn't have access to your face. So you could either just turn away, you could kind of cover your mouth very casually. We're trying to get away from that kind of covering our face entirely. So that you would say, ah, ooh, e, sh, s, and you would wait in between them. And from each time that you do it, so from session to session, you wouldn't necessarily do them in the same order. There are freebies of pictures of these on all of the websites for the distributors, for the manufacturers of the companies. And ideally, you would do this one at a time. So if they had 2 implants, you would do the right implant and then the left implant. You wouldn't necessarily do them together because you would want to make sure that both processors are getting adequate sound. So we've kind of talked about why we do screenings. We've talked about language modalities and amplification. And so what is language? And we know that language is just not listening and speaking. We need language for all the things that we do throughout the day. And it's that precursor for reading and literacy skills. When we're building language, whether we're building language for a child who uses spoken language or signed language, we want to make sure that we're going in the correct order, that we're building that hierarchy. Again, we're builders. We want to lay that foundation. And we need to make sure that we're laying the foundation in the correct order so that we don't end up with a child that has holes. I think one of my favorite analogies that sometimes we use with children who are deaf and hard of hearing, especially when we weren't identifying kids as early as we are now and getting them intervention, is that we would have like a piece of Swiss cheese, that we'd have the whole piece, but we'd have some holes, and some holes were bigger and smaller. So that's what we're trying to avoid. And by them getting to you all as soon as possible, we can eliminate some of that. So if they were to go the spoken route language, or the parents have chosen to use amplification, we want to make sure that they have an awareness of sound. So that detection piece is going to be, I hear that. Knowing that, there's a dog, or there's a helicopter, or there's a fire truck, and they don't need to know what it is at that point. They just need to know that there's a presence of sound, kind of like those link sounds. Then we're going to move into that discrimination. So the ability to determine whether 2 sounds are the same or different. Sometimes that would look like a short burst of sound and then a long sound. So we could say and then we would say bop, 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 bop. And can they discriminate between those 2 sounds? Then identification and comprehension. That's where then if they heard the fire truck, I heard it, there's a fire truck. What did you hear? You heard a fire truck, as opposed to hearing a bird chirping, or a dog barking, or a vacuum cleaner. So we want to make sure that we're working our way through those, and they need to have the detection before we can move through. In terms of a communication hierarchy, this is something that we would look at if a child was using sign language or a combination of language modalities. So again, that early interaction is really that detection. We're making sure that they have eye contact, that they're turning towards the listener. That detection also is giving them that visual of, oh, I hear that. They've watched it. They know they're supposed to stop and listen and pay attention to something. We're going to call their attention to something. Then we can work through play, comprehension, expression. We're going to move into those words and phrases. Then we would move to the social language of them being able to converse back and forth, and then speech, the production of sound. So, and again, this is just reiterating the fact that we want to try to move through the hierarchy. We want to be those builders and continue to lay foundation and build up floor to floor. We would never just start building the 14th floor and then go back to the 4th floor. And then setting reasonable expectations for kids while we're writing goals and working in therapy. We want to make sure that we're meeting the child where they are and not expecting them to do things that aren't feasible for them. And I love this picture of this little building block thing, because I think it's so important about hearing. And even if we took an edge off of the hearing, like just took a little corner off of it, one of the sides would kind of start to tip. We have to ensure that we know a child's hearing loss, the full scope of their hearing, before we can start stacking blocks on. Because if we start stacking talking or going to college or reading onto not a solid foundation, we're going to end up again with holes, and we're going to be asking children to do things that are not feasible for them. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get these videos to work, but let me see if I can. Let me see. I'm so sorry. The blessing and curse of two screens. Oh dear. How about I do this? I'm going to go ahead and keep going. And then at the end, if I can, I'll like stop sharing my screen and then we can try to put the videos up then. They are absolutely precious. And I don't know if you all have your phones. I know the cameras are off, but if you look up Bethan Cooper on Instagram, you will see the most precious little boy who has a syndrome. He is bilaterally implanted. He wears glasses. His family has chosen to use kind of a multimodal communication mode. So they use sign language, spoken language, and the mom, Beth, just does a really nice job of being a radio show host. She's constantly serving and returning with him. She's answering questions, and Cooper has had such incredible intervention that he is to the point where he's asking for clarification. He's asking, what does that mean? Or can you tell me more about that? And it's really awesome to watch the interactions between the two of them. She is not a trained therapist. She's a mom that has just taken off and has become kind of those four things that we talked about at the beginning. She really swaps from construction hat to tennis racket, and it's really sweet to see their interaction. So definitely check them out. And then the next video is Emily, and Emily is actually deaf herself, and her parents chose a multimodal communication for her as a young child. And so this was, several years ago that she was a little girl, and she has a child now. So her child would become a CODA, or a child of a deaf adult. And so they're teaching their baby both sign and spoken language. And the video clip that I'll show you hopefully in a little bit is her in the bathtub. He's in the bathtub, and she's working through both sign language and oral language, and expanding and really showing him one thing and then expanding on the language. We're going to talk in just a second about kind of those specific strategies that you can use with children who are deaf and hard of hearing. So we've hit on this before. We know we have to make the language accessible so that when we miss out on accessible language in those early years during that critical period of time where you all are the experts in, is that it's not only going to negatively impact language, but it's going to impact their learning and their literacy and also their emotional development. So kind of going into those social emotional skills as we start to mainstream kids into their schools of zone. So we want to make sure that we are giving good facial expressions and an expectant look. And I kind of modeled this with when we're looking at detection, that we really want kids to know, oh, I hear that. We want them to know that there is a sound. And that also goes for children who are learning sign language. You want to make sure that they have that attention, whether it's a spoken language that you're giving them or a signed language. We also talk about acoustic highlighting, where we're going to bring attention to the word or to the thing that we want the child to focus on, like, you're right. It is a red fire truck, especially if you're working on colors. So they know that it's a fire truck, and we're going to then give them that extra vocabulary word. Using parentese, I feel like you all are the experts here with this. You're going to use those sing-song voice. Well, you guys are probably, if you have, a pet or nieces and nephews or your own kids, we've all done it like, oh, look at the little baby. And you're really going to get on their level, and you're going to give them that parent ease, and they're going to lock in and can have a great conversation with them using parentese. And I am the worst at this, and I have tried over the last couple decades to slow down, but give them wait time. Kids need time to process information. So when you give them a directive or when you give them some language, pause, and then continue on. So I am known to ask a kid a question and then ask them 10 more questions. So ask a question and then wait. They need time to process. And then also kind of going back to those facial expressions and expectant looks, you can sign on the object or on the child to really bring the language to them. Their worlds are small, but the littler they are, and sometimes they need to be brought into that. So we have accessible language, and we want to have abundant language. And we want the language to be high quality. We love quantity, but the quality is what matters. And we want so kids that have that exposure are exposed to millions more words than kids who don't have language. And we know that the quality language directly impacts their ability to read and build their literacy skills later on. And while we're giving them that abundant language, that's where we're going to be that radio show host. That's when you're going to put that hat on, and you're going to expand and extend, and you're going to talk about beyond just the here and now. So kind of going back to that fire truck. You're right. It is a red fire truck. I wonder where it's going. Do you think there's been a fire? And kind of getting the child to think about what else or where else that fire truck might be going, and giving them that kind of theory of mind of like, we don't know, expanding that language, giving them so much more than just there's a red fire truck or there's a fire truck. Sing or talk out loud. So narrate everything you're doing. Washing the dishes, I'm not going to sing for you all because we'd have a mass exodus of people, but while you're doing the dishes, this is the way we wash our dishes, so you get the idea. But you can narrate, you can sing, we're going to build our blocks, and any tune works. So and we need to do the expansion and the extension along with the narrating, because children who are deaf and hard of hearing miss out on that incidental language. They're so focused on here and now and trying to attend, whether they're listening for auditory information or for signed language, that they're not really picking up on what other people are doing. And this can kind of show up later in school when they think maybe kids are talking about them, or because they missed it and then they know kids are laughing. So really honing in and helping kids expand their language, because we know they're going to miss out on that. And then making the language interactive. So we want to serve in return. We want to keep giving back to the kids. We want to ask questions. We want to expect an answer from a kid. Again, I'm guilty of it. I ask a million questions. I haven't given them wait time. And then I want them to answer 4 questions ago. So giving them wait time, asking a question, and then making sure that they're giving you a response back. And the response back, even for infants, can be just cooing, or they give you a sound and you give them a sound back, and vice versa. Also giving them help. So not telling them the answer, but instead, I'm thinking of something that helps people if there's a fire or an accident. So giving them a category, or I'm thinking of a word that rhymes with door or whatever, giving them the opposite of things. I'm thinking of a treat that's really cold, and letting them come up with the answer themselves. And lastly, this is not anything new to anybody, and the research is deep and wide on this, but reading, just reading, having parents, whether the child, whatever modality of communication they have chosen, to make connections, to elaborate on the text, again, that extending it, and then also in making what is implied explicit, because the kids who are deaf and hard of hearing aren't necessarily going to have that background information, and they need to be taught directly. So any type of figurative language or idioms and things would need to be explicitly taught. And as you're going into the homes or as the children are coming to your centers for therapy, it's so important to think about the listening environment and what we would perceive as a quiet listening environment. Their amplification may be picking up on. So, oftentimes, parents will come in, or maybe they'll have their computer and they'll be clacking on their computer trying to work while the kid's in therapy. That would be interfering. Making sure that TVs are off and radios are turned off. Are their appliances running? Making sure that you're sitting in a quiet place, that the lights are on, that kids have access to your face. I've walked into many classrooms before where they have the lights off, and I'm like, oh, I know you think that it's a calming presence in here, but we need to turn the lights on so that kids have access, or at least have lamps so that they can see your face. So all of this, if you're concerned about hearing loss, ask families, hey, do you have your newborn hearing screening? Did they pass? Did they pass both ears? If they don't know the status of their child's hearing, use your resources, reach out to people on the team. Do we know for a fact that this child has passed their hearing screening and we don't have concerns? The other thing is that it's so important, and we appreciate you all doing what you're doing, because you're already monitoring their milestones. You know where they are. You're keeping a pulse on them. The prevalence of confirmed hearing loss increases as age does. So you might not necessarily have a 1-year-old on your caseload, but they could develop a hearing loss while they're on your caseload. Even a mild or unilateral hearing loss can result in delayed speech, language acquisition, social, emotional, and behavior. Also, kids with a mild or unilateral hearing loss can lag behind in academic achievement. So if in doubt, reach out to your resources and make sure that you do not have a child that has a hearing loss on your caseload. And some signs that you can look for, so the reacting to loud sounds would be obviously if they were younger, they're not babbling, something's malformed or missing on their ear, they're not saying single words. A lot of their speech is unclear. That could be, again, a unilateral, maybe a high frequency loss, or if a parent expresses concern or someone on the team expresses concern. So the takeaways for this presentation is really just, before you start to screen for speech and language, and I know I'm guilty of it too, I want to check the boxes and get on with the evaluation, make sure that we have a PASS or a comprehensive audiological information about the child if we have concerns. And then we know that the natural environment is the best environment for kids to develop language. And we can enhance the outcomes of kids who are deaf and hard of hearing, of all of our kids, by being collaborative, by being a team member and working with parents. And research strongly supports those interdisciplinary collaboration. So reach out to people that can help walk alongside you and be a resource for those parents. We expect a lot out of providers, and I know I added 4 more jobs to you today, but really reach out and let other people, especially within the deaf and hard of hearing community, help you. So if you ask for the website, all of these are linked. And so these will take you to a variety of resources. The resources within the deaf and hard of community are extreme. There's just a variety of them. You can get lots of ideas, lots of help. Don't feel like you have to go it alone. And you can reach out to us, myself too, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions for you if you can't find what you're looking for. And then 2 things, we'd love to invite you guys. There's going to be a walk for hearing in November, on November 8th. It's going to be at Centennial Park. We would love for you guys to come walk with us. It's very relaxed. And then lastly, we are hosting a parent professional collaboration. If you have a parent on your caseload of a child who is deaf and hard of hearing, I would be happy to reach out to them and get them the information. They can come free of charge in Chattanooga. And we have keynote speakers and guest speakers. We have presentations from professionals. We have a family panel, and the parents always come back with just raving reviews about how they craved connection and they got it at this conference. So please let me know if I can get that information to you or to your families. And there is my contact information, Charles' contact information, and then Holly Allen is our program director. She's brilliant. If I can't answer it, which I don't know, then she would be able to answer your questions for you too. And there are my resources. Okay.
Thank you so much, Katie. This is wonderful information. I was a service coordinator in the greater Nashville area for many years. And so I encountered several families of children who were deaf or hard of hearing. And I would have loved to have seen this presentation at that time. There's so much great information. Everyone who's still on the call, keep in mind, if you are interested in obtaining a copy of this PowerPoint, Katie is happy to email it to you. It has those Instagram videos that we weren't able to see today. Not a problem at all. But if you do get the PowerPoint, you could view them there through the links, as well as those great resources and upcoming events. Great information. Thank you so much for sharing, Katie. We don't have any questions right now. Well, actually, we do. Megan Foster says, what is the current terminology used for a person who is hard of hearing or deaf?
So, that's a loaded question. There are different agencies and organizations choose to use different terminology. And if you are conversing with a person who has a hearing loss, my best advice would be to ask them. I work with some school-age children, and that's one of the questions that we just ask them directly. You know, how do you perceive yourself? Are you deaf? Are you hard of hearing? And then they can tell you. There are some agencies throughout Tennessee that choose to use different hearing levels instead of hearing loss, because there are different viewpoints on that hearing loss. It's more of a connotation of a disability, and they don't view it as that. So my best advice would be just to ask the person directly or ask the family how they'd like to identify.
Great, thank you. Another question. It says, in the deaf community, the CI and BAHA can be controversial. Do you have any suggestions for what to say to parents who ask about amplification and are worried about the concerns raised by the deaf community?
And I think that's, again, where you're going to put it in the parents, back into the parents' court of, it's your child and you have to do what you think is going to be best or most appropriate for them. So thinking about your long-term expectations of where you want your child to be, what types of modes of communication would you like for them to have and what kind of access? And then they can advocate for themselves and for their child based on what they choose to do. So, and some parents will choose a cochlear implant or a BAHA or hearing aids just for the safety aspect of their child just having awareness to sound in their environment.
Awesome. Another question. I have a parent that is interested in ASL. Is there somewhere that can be taught to her family and her child who is hearing impaired?
Yes, absolutely. You can either email me directly and I can put you in contact with somebody. Really, the best resource for them is going to be reaching out to either Tennessee School for the Deaf and getting a deaf mentor, and or working with Family Voices and having a pairs guide help them too. So that's great. And depending on, and also kind of depending where they are across the state, Bridges is another resource for them too. So lots of resources, and I can absolutely help you with that.
Awesome. Katie, I went ahead and put your email address in the chat as well.
Okay.
So people could, if they happen to exit out of the meeting, they can come back and look at that chat and see your email is in there. So just an FYI for everybody that's still on the call, I did place Katie's chat Katie's email in the chat. Another question or another comment.
I love that.
Yeah, we just attended our first silent dinner at Chick-fil-A in Greenville. What a great learning opportunity it was. That is awesome. Do you know about that, Katie?
Yeah, there are different opportunities where they'll do like silent dinners. I know one of the interpreting agencies in the state does like interpreter or deaf night out, and it's very cool. Like if you're not involved in the community and you're not deaf or don't have a family member, but you want to be, it's a great way to be immersed in it. So those are great questions. Thank you all so much for coming. And I'm sorry I took your whole hour. I didn't give you any of your time back.
No, you're totally fine. Other comments that are coming through are just thank you, that it's great information. So we appreciate you, Katie. This has been wonderful. And there's such an overlap with what you do and what we do. So this is great information for us.
Yeah, so.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording today. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to place them in the chat. I'll hang out for just a minute. Katie, you're free to go. I've given everyone your contact information, and we thank you again.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.